Welcome to the first episode of Season 3 of the My Solopreneur Life show. I am your host, Terry Pappy, and I'm so glad to get into this season, which is all about sales. Now, before we go anywhere with this, I want to clarify the distinction between sales and marketing. Sales is when you ask for business, right? Marketing is how you get people to pay attention so they come, and then you can ask for business. So that's probably the simplest way I could distinguish those two. I'm not going to be talking about marketing in this season. I may refer to it or use it for contextual purposes, but I want this to be about sales. And not just about sales from the standpoint of, hey, I'm going to teach you how to sell somebody. What I'm going to do is share my experiences on the sales road and the journey I've been on as a solopreneur and help you get more confident about your selling capability and remove any and all fears that you have about selling. In this episode, I'll tell you why that there's a lot of fear associated with selling. This first episode, I want to give you 3 of the top challenges initially anyway. We're going to be covering a lot of things in this season, a lot. Believe me, you're going to love it. It's like a mini course. It's going to be great. And then I'm going to have some guests and stuff, so we'll have a really good time. What I want to really address in this first one is these kind of core challenges that solopreneurs typically have when they start selling, especially if they've never had a sales role or any kind of experience doing any selling in the past, and which happens a lot. For example, I work with a lot of consultants who have left a corporate job, very seasoned, very experienced, great networks, but they've never sold anything. They know their craft, they have a great network, they know how to solve problems like at a exponential level because they've done it in the corporate setting at the enterprise level. But when it comes to sitting down across from a potential client and basically talking about how they can solve their problems, they really struggle. And a lot of these solopreneurs and that's just one kind of category, but many solopreneurs will get caught up in justifying their process or explaining their process. And the clients / prospects do not care how you get it done. They just want to know that you can get it done and you've done it for somebody else that led to a lot of success. In this episode, I want to talk about these 3 challenges that solopreneurs have. But I really am looking forward to spending time with you in this season to talk about sales, to give you as much as I can based on my experience. And believe me, I've had a lot of varied roller coaster experiences when it comes to sales. And I just want you to feel more confident and be able to drive revenue in your business, in your solopreneur practice, whatever it is that you're doing. So you'll find in this conversation that it is much more oriented towards service businesses versus transactional product-based businesses, meaning if you're selling a physical good. It's more about a person bringing value through their experience, their talents, their know-how, etc. For example, I'm in a service business, even though what I deliver is a tangible thing, such as a website or a brand or a certain type of strategy. What will help that context is understanding from the service perspective, especially for this episode. So let's go ahead and get started, and thanks for being here. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. Do you ever wonder why it's so hard to sell your own stuff? Do you ever think about that? It's like when I was working in corporate, it was pretty straightforward. I'd show up for work, I'd sit at my desk and do all my work, meet with people, blah, blah, blah. And I got it done. I went home and I didn't really think about it or worry about it. I was done. That's the nice thing about having a job is you don't bring your work home with you in most cases. At least you shouldn't. Unless you got a big deal going on, you're excited about it. When I got laid off and started my creative services business, I was like, oh crap, I actually have to go out and find clients. And I had no clue where to start, how to go about doing it. The funny thing is, I didn't, of course, know anything about marketing either from the standpoint of marketing myself. I figured it out eventually and realized that I'm actually a very good salesperson because I love to learn about my prospect's business. I care about it and I care about the person. So for me, it's like what I call relationship selling. And you've probably heard that term in sales training before. But when you're doing relationship selling, it's more about the relationship than it is about the transaction. Let's just put it that way. And I've probably gotten myself in trouble in the past, and I actually still do this a little bit to this day, is I care so much, I give a lot on top of the scope of the project. For example, I call it free consulting. And I remember when I took sales training with Sandler, and Eric was our facilitator slash trainer, and I learned so many cool little things from him. I hope to have him on this season because I want to just get him on the mic and just talk about sales because he's brilliant. He's not only a great facilitator, but he is a great salesperson. And it's not smarmy, it's not manipulative. It's just something that he's gotten really good at and he's naturally good at it. And so it was a great person to learn from. One of the terms that he often used was, you're doing too much free consulting. When I would walk through and I said this, and then the prospect said that, and he's like, hold on a second. He said, you're giving away the solution. You're basically giving your consulting service just ad hoc. And what that does is that diminishes the value of what you're doing. Now, there are exceptions to that. Every prospect's going to be a little bit different. They're going to have different types of questions. Here's a little sidebar too. Something else that I'm going to try to cover in this season. Every prospect, every person that you go and sell to is going to have their own personality and temperament and style. And some people want to know very detailed, like, well, how are you going to do it? What are the steps you're going to take? How long is it going to take? And what results can I expect? Some of those questions are pretty standard sales conversation type questions for them to ask because they're curious, like, what am I in for here? And then some of them are like, give me the bottom line. I just want to know that this is going to work. Who else did you do it for? Kind of like that executive. And then you have a whole bunch of stuff in between. You've got the visionaries, you've got the dreamers, you've got the people that are more interested in everybody holding hands and singing Kumbaya and being happy together. Are we going to all get along when we work together kind of thing? Remember that it's not all you, right? There are two people in that room having that sales conversation or on the phone or whatever. When you look at your own sales history, and a lot of what I'm going to be asking you to do in these episodes is take a look at your last sales call. Write down what happened. What was the conversation? And if you record them, sometimes people record Zoom calls or whatever. It's even better because you catch things that you might not have remembered. You want to analyze those things and say, oh, wow, I really did some free consulting here, or I never asked for a budget, or I didn't do this, or this person's style was, I felt like I was on the defensive. I had a prospect that one time that did become a client, and he was asking me so many questions about like how I did everything and what does that mean and why does that work that way. Ended up getting into my process, which isn't always the most comfortable for me, not because I don't love sharing how I do what I do, but it's difficult for others that aren't in my type of business or have had my experience to really understand what all that means. So it either goes over their head or they just hear a lot of noise. And I remember finding myself back on my heels because he kept probing and asking all these questions. And so I got naturally defensive because I felt like he was judging the way I was describing how I worked. And so that kind of put me on the defense a little bit. And that was all me. After we agreed to work, he was like, yes, I definitely want to work with you. I signed him up. I had him do an assessment, a 5 voices assessment, which is part of my strategy, the KISS marketing map that I do. And come to find that the way he communicates was exactly that. Someone who needed to know the nuts and bolts of everything, more out of curiosity and just like having that sense of control than anything else. And that's the Guardian voice, if you're familiar with 5 voices. Great book, by the way. And it's very beneficial for me, for my internal process, to have a client do the 5 voices assessment, because if I understand what their communication style is, then I know how to adjust how I communicate. Now, I'm getting into the weeds and getting ahead of myself. So let's come back. Let's come back to the episode core. This episode is about why selling feels so hard when you are the business, and the 3 hidden challenges that no one ever talks about. That's really what this episode is about. I did a lot of thinking about this because, believe me, I came up with a lot of challenges, and I'm like, no. I need to simplify this and just, what are the 3 core things that really affect other things down the line? And so the first challenge that solopreneurs often encounter when they're starting to get into that, I got to wear my sales hat now, I got to go into this, I have somebody who's interested in working with me now, how do I prepare for this? So the first thing is the ick factor. They don't want to feel pushy or salesy. And this was something I experienced, because another thing I learned from Eric, he says, we sell like we buy. And I found that really interesting. And I started thinking about, well, how do I buy? When I'm out shopping, whether it's buying a car or buying a t-shirt, we want to go in and get it done and get on with things that matter to us. And so how often do you go in and they swoop down on you and they're like, what are you looking for today? And they give you the whole, hey, I put you in a used car today for a good deal. And you just feel like you're being manipulated and they're attacking you. And take a look at how you buy. Because the things that you don't like about shopping, when you're out in the world, not necessarily when you're online, but it can be a little bit online, because sometimes you can look for information about a product and it doesn't give you all that information. That can be frustrating too. Many of us look at the shopping experiences, I want to be independent, and when I'm ready to hear from you, Mr. Sales Rep or Miss Sales Rep, I will raise my hand and say, okay, I have some questions. Can you help me understand this? But very often we're on guard a lot. Have you noticed that? Like when you go shopping, because we're so used to protecting ourselves from being taken advantage of or any of those things when we're buying something, like, am I going to get a deal on this? Is he going to mark this up? Is there anything I can do to get a better price? Blah, blah, blah. Think about how you are out in the world shopping, because that's how you'll think and act when you sell. Because the things that you resist, and this was so true with me, the things that you resist are things you won't do when you're selling. Just think about that. For me, I didn't want to come across as salesy. I didn't want to come across as any of that stuff I mentioned. I wanted to make them feel good about their decision. I wanted them to know that I was fully capable of solving their problem. All of those things were in my head and in my heart. And so when I approached the conversation, it was all about them. I'm very much about conducting an inquiry when I go and have a sales conversation, because the more I know about who they are, what they do, and what problems they're having, the better equipped I'm going to be in order to pre-sculpt a solution or a strategy for them. And I'm not going to sell somebody something that they don't need. These are all things that I like to consider when I'm talking to somebody, because again, I'm a relationship seller. I would rather lose a sale but keep the relationship than anything else. And that's still how I operate today, probably more than ever. When you're looking at the ick factor, it's like you're equating the sales process with being pushy or manipulative, as I said, or gross. And what happens is it leads to underselling. It leads to undercharging. That's a whole different thing, the way you price your services. I might have to do a whole season on that one. Or you avoid the sales conversations entirely. it can be really confusing for prospects to not have a proper sales conversation construct. And a lot of this can come from the bad experiences we had living in the world and shopping and being sold. That's the first one. First challenge is I don't want to feel salesy. I don't want to be pushy. It's that ick factor. The second challenge, and this is a big one, especially for solopreneurs, it's the fear of rejection. Now, when we liked somebody and we wanted to ask them out, we would often either ask them out, and if we got a no, it didn't feel so great, did it? But a lot of times if we get enough no's, then we say, well, I'm not going to ask because they'll probably say no. And the same thing works with sales. When you're a solopreneur, you are the product, in essence. You essentially are putting yourself on the line saying, I can solve your problem. I have all the skills, capabilities, and know-how to bring the solution that you need in order to get from point A to point B. Hire me and I'll solve the problem. It's kind of that basic, but when it's about us, the fear of rejection can keep us from actually asking for business. And this was such a big deal for me because I'm more in control of this than I used to be, but very much a people pleaser because I care about people. I have a very high nurturing characteristic in my personality. And so when I would go and talk to people, that's why I ended up free consulting. That's why I ended up over delivering when I would get engagements with customers. I kind of let them take advantage of me. And I don't do that as much anymore. Occasionally I'll slip, but we're only human, right? When you have such a fear of rejection, for example, another way that this manifests is like, let's say you're in the middle of a project and you screw something up. Well, instead of trying to cover it with dirt and hide it, which is like the fear of rejection, you fear that you're not only going to be rejected, but they'll close the project and just pay you off and move on. They'll yell at you. Sometimes we get into that child-parent relationship with our clients, which is not super healthy. Here's another thing about the fear of rejection is many of my consultant clients that have vast experience, vast knowledge, vast skill, they go in, they're excited about a big opportunity. They put together this great proposal, and then they disappear. They just sit back and wait for that prospect to say yay or nay. And this is one of the things that I love to work on with my clients is like, okay, you did the proposal. All right, now what? Well, we're waiting to hear back from them. And so I have to, I kind of have to work with them to say like, all right, hold on. First of all, let's not do the proposal. And I have a whole program around getting paid to propose, thanks to my lovely Pia Silva. And so when you get in the situation where it's like you give a proposal and then you sit back and you pray that it'll come through, instead of confidently saying, this is how we're going to do this, let's go ahead and get started, sign here. Prospects really can sense, like at an energetic level or subconsciously, they can sense that you're insecure about selling, which to them can convey as insecure about your capability. That's a real big problem. The more confident you can be, the less fearful you can be when you go into these sales conversations, the more that energy, that confidence will convey to that prospect. And they're like, wow, I really, really like how they put this together. And I just like that person because it's personal. It's a business of you. It can work both ways. It can be a worry thing like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to get rejected. They're going to say bad things about me. It's going to be a bad experience, negative Nelly kind of stuff. And then there's another one. It's like, I know I can help these people. I know that I am super skilled and I can get in there and I can do everything I need to do. And that's it. And so the difference in energy alone will broadcast that you are fully capable and that you're able to go ahead and take care of that for them. The third challenge that solopreneurs have is, and this is more pragmatic, which, I like to do the pragmatic, practical stuff, is they don't have a process. Like they just kind of get in there and wing it. Some calls go good, some calls don't go good. The next thing you know, they're like, well, I didn't get that because of this, that, and the other. The great thing about having a sales process, and it doesn't need to be super complicated. It can be structured in a way that's comfortable for you. So you know you're doing the right things, you're following up, you're being a high communicator, you're making that prospect feel confident that you can do stuff, but you're not going too much where you come across desperate. Okay. So having a process, every conversation should have a similar structure. And if there's no clear path from how you started the outreach, the initial conversation to the actual asking for business, then you're going to be all over the place. You're going to miss doing some things on some calls. You're going to forget doing others. And you're not going to be able to have that confident energy like you've done it 1,000 times. Having some sort of process or structure around the actual sales conversation and what leads up to it is going to be really beneficial. Let's just recap real quick. First thing is the ick factor. What story do you have in your head about sales that is making you not so confident, making you resistant to ask for business, to ask for money, right? A lot of us just don't feel comfortable asking someone else to pay us for work. And so that ick factor can really diminish your confidence and your ability to go in strong, have a good offer, ask for money, and do all the things you need to do when it comes time to have that conversation. The second one is the fear of rejection. A business of you, it's personal because it's us. We are selling ourselves. We are putting ourselves out there in a vulnerable way. And we don't want these people who we're trying to work with to have any kind of negative experience or reject us. Let me tell you what, you will get a lot of no's. Let's just face it. You're going to get people that say no, and they'll have their reasons. Not the right time. They don't have the budget. It's not a fit. There's something about them that rubs you the wrong way, or vice versa. Many people will say no for reasons that have nothing to do with you. The more you're out there having conversations, the more you're out there, and yes, you will hear no, your skin will get tougher. You'll just feel like it's okay. I heard no, and I'm still alive, right? So it's not the end of the world to be rejected. There will be other opportunities. If you stay in business, if you keep going, if you put your head down and say, this is what I really want to do, this is who I am, I want to get out there and solve these problems and I want to get paid well for it, you are going to do just fine. That's number two. And then the last one is just a lack of a sales process and no structure. If you have something that you're following, like here I do this, yes, I did that, and then ask this question and then ask that question. There's some key things that you can talk about. And this is some of the stuff that I learned in Sandler was, how to move a prospect through a sales conversation. Each one has a purpose, like building rapport, identifying budget. If you have some sort of structure that works for you, whether it's from a sales training like it was for me, find the right sales model that you like that feels in alignment with your personal brand and start testing these out. And you'll find one that works good and then document it. Put it down on paper. Say, listen, I'm going to try this for 6 months. I'm going to work through this and make notes of every sales call and how it goes, where I forget one of my steps or when I screw up or whatever. And it's continual process improvement. What I'd like for you to do for a prompt or 3 prompts is, now that you know what the 3 core challenges are for most solopreneurs, I want you to write, for the first one being the ick factor, write down that story. What is the story you have about sales? Do you have a fear of being salesy or pushy or manipulative? And if so, where did that come from? Like, was that your experience? Did you have a friend or relative that sold that way? Were you taken advantage of? Know that that's driving that thinking, that story. And then I want you to write, this is what I want to believe about sales. This is how I can show up as a salesperson. So that's the first prompt. The second one is really just get comfortable with people saying no. I had a friend once that was trying to get over her fear of rejection. And she did an exercise where she asked a bunch of friends to do like a mock sales conversation with her. And she told them the only thing you need to do is act interested and lean in and everything. But then in the end, just say no and don't give me a reason or make something up that's not the reason. And then we can talk about it. And what it did was it desensitized her to hearing no. I thought that was a really great idea for her to do that and really just kind of toughen her skin around fear of rejection. And then the last thing, obviously, if you have been making sales calls, try to write down what is the process you go through. Just chunk it. It's like the first thing is, all right, I identify the prospect. Like for me, if I get somebody referred to me, somehow they end up coming in, whether it's through a lead generation or they just find my website or they listen to this wonderful show and they're like, I really like Terry. I think she's awesome. I think I want to talk to her about helping me in my business. And they go to my site and my calendar's right there. They make an appointment and it's all about, let's get to know each other. What's your challenge? Let's have a talk. I'll give you my full attention. We can discuss it and then we'll take it from there. That's my first step. I've created an environment where people can easily book time with me. That's the first step in my sales process. Then once we have that conversation, there are some administrative things that I do. And then, of course, I go ahead and I follow up to the next step based on what we talked about. So I have my own kind of very informal process that I adapt because that works good for me. I adapt to each prospect that I have a conversation with. Some of them I need to nurture a little bit. So I'm like, listen, I get you're not ready now. I just had one of those this week. I get you're focused on doing this one implementation, but I really can see opportunities where I could help you. And I enjoy you guys. Again, the relationship thing came forward. I said, I'd love to work with you sometime. So let's just get back in touch. And then you follow up. And that's another thing. It's like, please make sure that follow-up is part of your process. I am such a proponent on communication that it's so important to stay highly communicative when you are in a sales role and doing those things. Look at the process, like what did you do? And even if you don't have a formal process, just write and chunk it. Like I said, say, okay, I started here, then I did this, and then I did this, and this is how I asked for money, and this is how I closed the deal. And see where there's opportunities for you to either be more efficient, be more like, I want to talk less about my process, like how I do the work, and more about them and their business and what's possible. And that was a big learning for me because that was more when I was back on my heels and kind of defending like, well, this is what I do with the website, or this is what I do, why it's important to have a personal brand, blah, blah, blah. And now I rarely talk about anything that I do other than when it gets to the point when they've really understood that I get their business. I've asked all the right questions and they're like leaning in and I'm like, well, this is what I recommend for us to do. Or I give them a choice. We can do this or we can do this. That way the power is in both parties. The power is in their hands and it's in mine as well because I've presented an opportunity as well as they have. Those types of things are all earmarks of a successful sales conversation. And you'll hear me say conversation more than you'll hear me say call. Like, it's a sales call. No, it's a conversation. It's a coming together of people to find mutual alignment in a solution that someone's willing to pay for. When you look at it from that standpoint, and those three top challenges, just do your own assessment on kind of where you are in those areas and score yourself. Say, listen, this is an area that I really could use some work. Like, let's say fear of rejection is a big one for you. The first one, not so much. I've never really had a bad sales experience and I understand the role it provides. Or you need that structure. Like, I have no structure. I pants it the whole time. I fly by the seat of my pants. Figure out what that is, because when you start taking steps toward improving your sales experience overall for yourself as well as for future prospects, it's going to be that much more enjoyable for you to have those conversations. I mean, I could have sales conversations all day long. I love learning about prospects and their business. And so I want you to have that level of comfort, confidence, and zero fear. Sales should be fun. Sales should be a great way for you to showcase what it is you do and how you can solve problems. Hopefully that was helpful for you, and enjoy the prompts. All right, we'll see you next week. Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt if this episode had a prompt, and you get that homework done because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one.